Welcome, I'm Patricia Osseweyer and I will discuss feedstocks in this unit. The choice of feedstocks is an important factor in any production process, but especially in bio-based production. Why do feedstocks need to be renewable and which types are available? How to select the source and how to use the sugar that can be present inside the feedstock. And how do we ensure a choice that is sustainable? Before the Industrial Revolution, when we discovered the potential of fossil fuel resources, we used agriculture, fishery, and forestry for all our needs, including transport, light and heat, food, feed, and materials. In a way, a bio-based economy helps us to return to this principle. And why is that beneficial? Well, implementing such an economy can help us close cycles, such as the carbon cycle. We can use renewable crops and residues for our needs without emitting large volumes of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. Of course, in comparison to 100 years ago, our energy and material demand per capita is much higher and we have our planetary boundaries. We therefore need smart solutions to effectively use renewable energy and crops and residues to provide for our needs now and in the future. For example, through optimizing yields of biomass production and making sure we use the biomass in a very efficient way. Or going even further and use our organic waste and CO2. It will require different practices and smart technology to make it viable, safe, and sustainable. When we look at feedstocks, there are many different types to consider. There are food crops such as corn, sugarcane, and oil palm. Of course, we primarily need these to provide food. In order to not compete with this too much, we would like to use the residues left over after these food crops have been harvested and processed. We can also use dedicated energy crops that are specifically adapted to provide for our energy and product needs, such as plants that grow fast or have a low water or nutrient need. Examples are switchgrass, energy cane, elephant grass, miscanthus, jatropha, and agave. Then there are wood crops and forestry residues and ocean residues. A fifth interesting source of feedstocks are municipal and industrial waste streams, including ultimately the use of greenhouse gases itself, CO2. The different feedstocks are often divided into categories or generations. In higher generation resources, more technology is needed to unlock the more hidden sugars in the crop residues or woody plant materials. And we need adapted microorganisms that can do the job. This is expensive, but it will have major advantages. And given that we have so many options for feedstocks, how do we then select the most suitable one? Well, three factors could be identified to have an effect on this choice. First, the biochemical composition of the biomass itself is an important factor. What is the content of sugar and other components? Second, it's important to assess the yield of biomass per hectare and the yield of sugar per ton biomass. This, of course, is influenced by the biochemical composition of the feedstock. And third, the sustainability of the crop, including land and water use, fertilizer needs, ecologically and social aspects, and greenhouse gas emissions associated with the production and harvesting of the crop. Together, these aspects affect the overall business case and, amongst others, determine whether the business case is sustainable in terms of cost and revenues. There are general differences between the biochemical composition of different generations of biomass. Even within one category, such as agricultural waste, there are clear differences in composition. Corn cobs can have relatively low lignin content, while cotton stalks contain a high percentage of cellulose. This is important because the chemical composition will be reflected not only in the yield of sugar per ton biomass, but also in the number and intensity of pre-treatment steps early on in the process. When a feedstock is selected based on yield, the first yield that is considered is the tons of biomass produced per hectare. Second, the amount of sugar that is extracted per ton of biomass. Later on in the process, each ton of sugar will yield a certain amount of product. Yields differ between feedstock categories, specific crops, and even between different soils and climates. To give you some insight in the variability in yields, here are some figures of crops from different geographical locations. You see their biomass yield per hectare, the yield of seed or grain, and the biofuels energy that can be gained from their sugars, lignocellulose and residue. Later, you will learn how to calculate how much of a certain product you will be able to form based on these yields. Sustainability is one of the drivers behind the switch from a fossil based to a bio based economy. When selecting a feedstock, it is therefore important to realize what effect this choice will have on the sustainability of the process. Of course, supply security, emissions, and costs are very important, but it is more complex. What are the ecological effects of producing the crop, including its effect on biodiversity and long-term water and soil quality? How does the production of a particular crop compete with available resources such as arable land and water? And how does it compete with food supply? What is the impact on local employment? These are social effects that we need to take into account. Further on in the process, the choice of feedstocks will also influence the greenhouse gas emissions associated with harvesting and processing. There are many aspects of sustainability that we need to take into account, both in feedstock selection and in the rest of the process, including supply security. Thinking along these lines, much research is being done into dedicated energy crops. Plant breeding is applied to allow for more sustainable biomass production, for instance by increasing yields per hectare while reducing the use of water. They can also be selected and adapted to grow on marginal soils or in between cropping cycles of food crops to improve soil quality. Another factor that is considered is selecting crops that are native to a certain region. We are also developing completely land-free food and feed production based on renewable energy and carbon dioxide input. Is that the solution for future generations? Or will it be co-development of industrial biotechnology to improve land management and create social development? It's for you to consider. Let's go back to the biomass feedstock utilization for now. So what part of this lignocellulosic biomass can be utilized by microorganisms? Well, the useful part contains cellulose and hemicellulose. These are both chain polymers, but there is a slight difference in the types of sugars of which these polymers are composed. Cellulose is easiest to utilize because it contains only 6 carbon sugars like glucose, which most microorganisms can naturally digest. Hemicellulose contains the same C6 sugars, but it's also partly composed of 5 carbon sugars. Many microorganisms used on a large scale in industrial biotechnology cannot naturally metabolize C5 sugars and have to be engineered to do so in order to utilize the full potential of the biomass. The other part of plants is lignin, a complex and irregular polymer that is tough by design. It's made by the plant for structure and rigidity and to protect it from its environment. Lignin can therefore not be digested by most microorganisms used in biotechnology. To release the sugars for fermentation, the plant structure consisting of cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin first has to be opened to create space around the cellulose and hemicellulose chains. In the second step, the often insoluble lignin can then be removed from the sugar polymers. Finally, in the third step, enzymes are added to hydrolyze these polymers to release their sugar monomers, which can then be metabolized by microorganisms. Of course, there are also other options than hydrolysis to open the plant structure and fermentation to process biomass for energy or products. For example, through gasification to make syngas or by a process called pyrolysis, which produces bio-oils. Concluding, in order to select the most suitable feedstock and processing method, engineers have to take all aspects into account. Only then can a process be designed that is economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable. So join us in the next unit.